is really worth living.
Yes.
And if there's any kind of theme in this book, it's that your parents had that, your father had that when he helped to bring down the Scharnhorst, and your aunt had it when they sort of went over in Dunkirk and D-Day. And the fight is to find those days, to find enemies that are worth fighting and fight them. And that you saw that in your parents as well as...
Yeah, they were all church-going, well, not my mother, as I'll say in a second, but church-going, patriotic, monarchical, pro-empire. But my father's ship on Boxing Day 1943 sent a big Nazi battleship right to the bottom of the sea, which is a better day's work than any I've ever done. And my aunt Ina, as a nurse, was in Wave 2 in Normandy and got all the way to Berlin before they stopped her. And my mother, who I think had a different motive, having come from a Jewish family in Liverpool, for disliking Nazism, also joined the Wrens, as they called it, the Women's Royal Navy Service, and went to a very bitter job in Scapa Flow. So there was nothing to deplore in this, even though I felt that they were, so to speak, all voting for the wrong party and admiring the things like monarchy and empire that I didn't think you needed to admire to be against fascism.
But
so it was interesting and complex in that way.
Yeah, it is complicated because the real opposition to them was that they were kind of defeated, weren't they? I mean, your father was kind of defeated. So he knew about the Falklands and had played some, and knew more about the Falklands than you did, but he didn't support the regaining of the Falklands because he thought, well, too hard to...
Yes, he thought it was all over. He thought, if you read the poems of Philip Larkin, say, or even at a lower level, the letters of Dennis Thatcher to Private Eye, you have an impression of the way my father would talk when the gin was getting a bit low. It's all up with the old country. The place is run by yobs now. People get rich by making money, not by earning it. And all of this he didn't know it was a satire in a way on Thatcherism and on some kinds of capitalism, but it was just a feeling that the baser element had triumphed and that the old glories were departed.
But your mother, of course, was significantly different from this in terms of her preparedness to get out of it or her desire to escape from this.
Oh, she tried so hard. She tried so hard to get out of it. She wanted to open a dress shop. She wished she could have cocktail parties that people would come to. She signed me up at the Chichester Festival Theatre, a name which still sounds to me like a knell in certain ways. Wanted there to be gaiety and art and humor and having, as both of them had, life first of the slump, the recovery from the First World War, then the war, another one, and then a long period of austerity, rationing, poverty. By that time, they were in their 50s. Where had the youth gone? Where had it all gone? I remember feeling, it's an awful thing to feel sorry for your parents, but I did. I felt protective of them. I thought I was bringing them up. But she always had a resource of wit to help out on that.
But then when she did,
and she bought me a dinner jacket to go to Oxford with, and then I exchanged it for a donkey jacket, and she had to see me being arrested on the TV news all the time. And would say things like, "Oh, darling, I mean, I don't terribly mind, it's just that I do a bit when my friends ring up and say they're so sorry to see you."
But then when she did break out, there was the tragedy, which is one of the great tragedies in this of this book, which you don't have to talk about if you don't want to. People can read the book to find it, but it is a very, very extraordinary tale.
Well, if I've written about it, I guess I have to be asked about it. I mean, my father was a very honest man and a very brave and honorable one, and very sparing with himself and very self-denying. And in many ways an exemplary character, but in the words that I learned from my mother, he was boring. He bored her. And she used to say to me, that's the one thing you can't do, it's the one unforgivable sin. And so when my brother and I were grown up, she exchanged him for a guy who wasn't boring at all, who was a bad poet and a charmer, and a former spoiled priest of the Church of England, and an all-round, plausible character, but who was bipolar and a failure, and couldn't hold a job, and whose charm wore off. And I think she realized that the last love of her life was a flop, and she wasn't going to get another chance. And she could see it stretching all before her, and decided that life wasn't on those terms worth living anymore, and made a suicide pact with him. I think under pressure from him. I had to do a long investigation at one point. And killed herself with him in an act that was first reported in the papers as a murder. So I had to go to Greece when I read about it, thinking I was going to a crime scene and arriving at one, and then finding that no, it wasn't, that she loved him enough to even if she didn't want to die, she loved someone who did badly need to die and wanted to take her with him. So that was a facer, and a particularly bad one for my father, because he knew she was with another guy, but it wasn't public. It wasn't. They were very respectable about it. If he needed her to come with him to a sherry party, she'd go, and there'd be nothing said. So everyone found out about it and about her, all on the same day, and in the press. It must have been a titanic shock for him.
Yeah.
So that was the end of my family life in a way.
Yeah, and after that, the book turns political, I think would be fair to say, not least in Greece, where the Hitchin story of looking out at the world, finding out which side you're on, and going hell against them. I suppose that was quite an easy one in a sense, I suppose, being against the bad guys in Greece. It got a bit harder later on.
People forget, when they remember the 60s, they think about Vietnam, of course, and Czechoslovakia, and Cuba, and Mozambique, and the rest of it. And of course, the famous events in Paris. But what they forget, well, maybe they don't. I'm sure there's some people who don't, but that in 1967, as the 60s were really getting underway, a military coup in Greece that brought to what we always called the cradle of democracy, this regime of steel helmets and dark glasses and sadists and torturers, was an unbelievable thing. I mean, here's a NATO country in what our bosses are calling the free world, and it's given up without protest to this gang of thugs, which was still in power when my mother's body was found there. And I can't see the audience properly because of the lights, but who here has seen the film Zed, sometimes called Z, by Costa Gavras? Not bad. The best political thriller ever made on screen, about the murder of Grigori Lambrakis, a famous Greek oppositionist. And the coroner who I had to see in my mother's case was the same man who had said that Lambrakis had been killed by hitting his head on the pavement and not by the truncheon from a secret policeman in the pay of the Greek royal family, who had, in fact, it was later found, killed him. So I was in this surreal world of pursuing a murder investigation that became a suicide inquest with the guy who was the chief, so to say, necropolitan spokesman for this filthy regime. So it was a very intense week, yeah. And taught me something that I already knew, which is that it's very hard to have a non-political private life. It's a funny thing. You may wish you could. I wish everyone could have. I'm a great respecter of the private life. I hate totalitarianism and theocracy because it claims to take over the private life, but try as you may to lead it, you will keep on finding that politics invades it. And you may as well know that is going to happen to you.
I mean, one thing that's clear is your parents' sort of acceptance becomes the template for your resistance, if you like. So you find that other people perhaps are prepared to accept, don't care too much about the Greek colonels, don't care too much about what's going on in Northern Ireland, or don't care at all about what's going in Argentina. And your boom, boom, boom sort of determination to make sure that people do care. And that is the theme of this thing, of choosing a side and saying, just going making sure everybody else knows about it.
Well, that's very generous, Peter, but, and thank you, but before we leave the parents, well, we don't have to if you don't want
to. It seems to be that it's against that acceptance.
Here's the thing, neither of them had the same politics as I did, really at all. My mother was more liberal than my father, but not by that much, or not in the terms I was using anyway. But what I found was, when I fulfilled all their expectations by getting to Oxford and getting to Balliol at that, which is the one I'd set out to do, which, in case you don't know, is the College of Effortless Superiority.
Until the University Challenge.
Till by representing it on University Challenge, I dealt that reputation a blow from which it has still not recovered. And then disappointed them by spending all my time at Oxford not going in that dinner jacket to fashionable and classy events, but getting roughed up by the police and so forth. For all that, they both thought that at least I was doing it on principle. And since all the things they'd done in their lives were done out of some kind of conviction, they thought, well, at least, even if it's the wrong thing, at least he's doing it for that reason. And that was a very touching tribute I had from both of them that I never expected to have. But though I now wonder, with the advantage of advancing years, whether I was seeking that kind of praise from them without realizing I was doing it.
It's a very touching, the pride that your father took in your press cuttings, even though they were so alien to what he wanted to say.
My father, who would say things like, what do you think what's going on in Northern Ireland? And I'd been in Ulster a lot, and I'd try and say this. He said, don't you think it's time for a good dose of martial law? As if British force had never been tried in Ireland before. He really was like that. I found out that he was later, quite by chance, that he was giving Christmas gift subscriptions to the New Statesman to his few remaining old sea dog naval friends, saying, I don't know if you ever see this magazine, my son occasionally writes an article. I was thunderstruck by that. And I used to wonder if... He also told me once he thought I'd been brave to go to Beirut to write a piece about the war there. That really amazed me, because he'd been on the Arctic convoys and all the rest of it. And I thought, well, maybe that's what I was looking for, yes.
Right.
A vertiginous thought.
The way the book then takes on a whole series of these conflicts that you've been involved in, and some of which most of your friends have agreed with you, and a lot of them people have seriously disagreed with you. Which do you think of all? Which was the hardest call? So this is one. Which was the? Is it always so clear who's right and who's wrong as it appears to be when you're writing about it?
Well, what I try and